Running Aces Casino and Racetrack is the Twin Cities' premier choice for exciting entertainment, 24/7 gaming and dining, monthly comedy shows, and $1 blackjack with no commission or ante, making it the most player-friendly casino around. Trout Air Tavern at Running Aces offers Minnesota-inspired handcrafted dishes with locally sourced ingredients and the trout that made the area famous. Running Aces Casino and Racetrack, 25 minutes north of downtown. Visit runaces.com. Running Aces, your night out is waiting. TCL is a proud sponsor of the 1500 ESPN studios. TCL, America's fastest growing TV brand.
For those who simply can't get enough talk about the Vikings, we present Bonus Chatter. Bonus chatter about your favorite team that's unscripted, unfiltered, and uninterrupted. This is another edition of 1500 ESPN's Purple Podcast.
Oh, welcome to another episode of the Purple Podcast. Matthew Coller with you, and joining me from Channel 7 ABC Buffalo, my friend and the man I consider the best Buffalo Bills reporter in the city, Joe Buscaglia. Joe, how are you?
I'm great, Matt. Good talking to you, man.
Yeah, you as well. You know, you and I were talking a little bit before this week just about how I always wish good teams on you, Joe, and it never happens. So maybe I'm going to wish bad teams on you, and then they will eventually get it turned around.
Well, listen, there is a certain amount of flair to be had when you cover a team that starts off the year 0-8, which was my first full year on the beat with the Bills. That was back in 2010. They went 0-8. Everybody thought they were going to get Cam Newton at the end of things. They end up going 4-4 down the stretch, and then Cam Newton ends up going to the Carolina Panthers. So, and then the Bills have been in a kind of a toilet bowl cycle ever since then. But now it seems like they've kind of gotten their act together, and they actually have somewhat of a plan, which is refreshing to see here in Buffalo.
Well, you go through those years and you think about the number of quarterbacks that they could have had, and it's Cam Newton that they're on the doorstep and then decide to win games for no discernible reason. Russell Wilson was too short, said Buddy Nix, which, you should definitely pass on talented players because they're too short. And then also Patrick Mahomes. You trade out of the pick in Buffalo to get more draft picks, while Kansas City gets their future franchise quarterback. So I think that what that means, Joe, is now if Josh Allen doesn't work out, they'll really be talking about trading out of that Patrick Mahomes pick.
Yeah, the Mahomes one is the one that's going to stick in people's craw, but I do at least offer this up just to the conversation. Back when that was done, the Bills, they had a GM on paper, but that GM was still Doug Whaley, and they were just kind of playing out the string, wait until the end of the draft to let him go and let him go on his merry way. And Sean McDermott controlled that entire draft, and but Brandon Beane, their current GM, was not there. So I think they knew what they were going to do at the GM spot heading into the draft, and they thought it was too early into the rebuild, and also with the fact that they didn't want to try and sell this GM job to someone out there that didn't believe in a quarterback or didn't get a chance to swing at a quarterback themselves. So I totally get it, and the Mahomes thing is going to be a conversation for the rest of time until he either proves to be a bust or Josh Allen proves to be good. But that is at least part of the nuance of the conversation that has to be considered.
So tell me though, Joe, is there anything to be said so far, or is it just too soon and you haven't seen hardly any of it? But in training camp you get indicators, and in preseason you get indicators of whether the doubters of Josh Allen were way off, were they close? Does it look like it's just way, way too soon to get any indication of that? Because on this very podcast, I have not been friendly to Josh Allen because I have a really tough time believing that a guy who completes 50% of his passes at Wyoming and doesn't dominate at the college level is just all of a sudden going to beat great NFL quarterbacks week in and week out, and great NFL defenses, and handle defensive pressure in the NFL, which is way, way more harsh than it is in college. So I have not believed in him, and when the Bills picked him, I thought, well, you've just basically wished another couple of years of being down on yourselves and you'll be drafting another quarterback soon. I mean, is that too harsh, or, I mean, what have you seen so far?
Well, I think it might be a little too harsh just for right now. I will say, and I was a little bit in your camp too when back in the draft process, but once the Bills took him, I went back and really dug deep into every single game that I could get my hands on of him at Wyoming. And I think part of the equation that has to be considered with him, and it's not the whole story because the argument is quarterbacks can overcome these things, but it was 2 years ago, his offensive line was just horrid. They were giving up countless amounts of pressures, and he could never get comfortable back there. But he had a good, solid core of a running back in Brian Hill, who ended up making the league, a wide receiver in Tanner Gentry, who made the Bears last year, and now he's on their practice squad this year. And so they at least had some pass-catching talent. That kind of flipped his final year at Wyoming. The offensive line got a little bit better, but all his good pass catchers, running backs, they were gone. So he was basically doing the whole song and dance by himself. However, good quarterbacks have to overcome those things. And I think there's enough there with him where you see these flashes where it's like, okay, if he can harness these things, that's what these evaluators are talking about. And I will say, you know, part of the problem that I saw with him coming out of Wyoming was that his footwork was terribly inconsistent. And I know how much you appreciate Zoolander as well as I do. And the thing I would liken it to with Josh Allen is he's not an ambi thrower. And this is why. When he's throwing to his left-hand side, or at least when he did in college, he would almost open up his left hip the same way that like a second base or a shortstop would when he's trying to turn two, and when he's throwing it to the sideline, because he's got the arm and he could rely on it at all times. And that is specifically something I saw offensive coordinator Brian Daboll working with Josh Allen on during the spring and the summer. Now, we saw that creep in a little bit in his first start against the Chargers, but that said, it's been better since his days in college. So there are some flashes of progress for him. It's just way too early at this point to know if he's actually going to hit or if he'll be consistent enough, but they have a lot of hope in him. I mean, Brandon Beane, I think, is a pretty smart guy, and the GM of the team. And, he has a lot riding on this kid, and he wouldn't draft just anybody, I don't think.
Well, you wouldn't know anything about a GM who puts his career on the arm of a guy who's drafted sort of mid-first round for his big hands and big arm, would you?
No, I don't know. That doesn't sound familiar at all.
No, nothing. Well, my concern if I were the Bills for this week, Joe, is that they're going to be reading Josh Allen's Yagoogly because he's facing, and even if Everson Griffin isn't playing, this is still an incredible defensive line who just added another really good player, and a player that actually the Bills, I think, wanted to pick up in Tom Johnson, with Pro Bowl linebackers, the best safety in the game for my money, Harrison Smith, one of the best shutdown corners in the game in Xavier Rhodes, one of the best defensive minds in the game, and one of the most difficult stadiums to play in for any team. I mean, this just seems like if you were trying to ruin a quarterback's confidence, this is exactly what you would do to him.
Lucky's 13 Pubs has you covered for the best game day experience this football season. Tons of TVs, legendary appetizers, amazing fresh half-pound burgers, handcrafted sandwiches, and a wide variety of other pub favorites. The drink menu is awesome, too. Huge selection of tap beer, handcrafted cocktails, and the best Bloody Marys in town. Seriously, these Bloodies are awesome. Try the Bacon Bloody, the Jalapeno Bloody, the Mother Mary, or just get a flight and try them all. Plus, Lucky's 13 celebrates Sunday Fun Day. Happy hour all day long on on Sunday every Sunday. Events and prize giveaways during games, too. Lucky's 13 has locations in Bloomington, Burnsville, Mendota, Plymouth, and Roseville. Having people over for the game? Call ahead to Lucky's and order some of those legendary apps, and they'll be ready to bring home when you get there. It's football time at Lucky's 13 Pubs. Find them online at luckys13pub.com. luckys13pub.com. It's the most wonderful time of the year, football time. And Lucky's 13 Pubs has you covered for the best game day experience. luckys13pub.com.
Right. I will say, though, for Allen, and I'm going to go over how the Vikings stack up with the Bills after this quick little nugget. Josh Allen is naive, but in a good way, because he doesn't let stuff get to him. Like he's just kind of got a blocker around his head the entire time, and he's just kind of a happy-go-lucky guy, more of a kid type of personality than anything, but he still gets serious and goes to work when he needs to be on the practice field and when he needs to hype the guys up and everything like that. But as far as losing confidence after 1 week, I mean, his confidence should have been shot after Wyoming, but he somehow got through all that and still has a good head on his shoulders. But in terms of the matchup, I mean, this is just a full on tilt towards the Vikings. I mean, I was on, we were recording our Bills Beat podcast, Matthew Fairburn of The Athletic and I, earlier today. And I literally sat there and said, Matthew, I don't know where on the field, the Bills win. And I think the only thing that came out of my mouth was maybe the rookie Harrison Phillips, if they give him enough time at one technique over the center. That might be the only spot where they can do some winning, because, I mean, like you pointed out, Xavier Rhodes is a shutdown guy. He's one of my favorite players in the league. And him going against Kelvin Benjamin, good night. I mean, Kelvin Benjamin struggles with separation itself, and a guy who's that big and has that much range, no shot. I would be shocked if Xavier Rhodes, if not picks off a pass of Josh Allen's, then comes very close to it because of how little separation his top receivers give him. And then when you look defensively for the Bills, I mean, Tre'Davious White is a really, really good corner, and I think there's a chance they might stick him on Stephon Diggs, but then who the heck is covering Adam Thielen?
Right.
Because they've got a rookie at nickel, Taron Johnson, who's just coming off a shoulder injury. They've got Phillip Gaines, who literally has a fractured elbow. He has like a bionic arm over his entire elbow area. And okay, is he going to cover Adam Thielen? And then even Laquan Treadwell, even though he hasn't done a ton in the NFL to this point, he still has the physical attributes to beat up a matchup like that. So I just don't know where this Bills team wins. If their best hope is to get pressure on Kirk Cousins and to try and create some turnovers, but even that, they have not shown a great ability to do that so far this season.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting about the Vikings offense is you can't really lock on to one wide receiver, because John DeFilippo and Pat Shurmur before him, they can move these guys around like chess pieces all over the field. So if you try to lock down Stephon Diggs, it isn't like some receivers that just go out to the X and that's where they stay on that outside all the time. I mean, they're going to line up in bunch formations. They're going to line up in the slot. They're going to move everybody around, and they're going to make it way more difficult for the one super talented player over there to try to track him down. I also haven't seen anybody yet who can shut down Stephon Diggs because of his just insane route running ability and the fact that he could go up and get almost anything. And that's the thing about the pressure, Joe, is that even if the Bills are able to create some up front, it just doesn't really seem to affect these two guys, Thielen and Diggs, all that much. And then the Vikings play off of that if you're going to blitz, then they're going to run screens. And they ran a screen. I don't know if it was a blitz, but it might have been to, Kyle Rudolph, that resulted in a 23-yard play and a key spot for them against the Packers, where it's like they've got all sorts of different things that they could do because there's playmakers all over. Now, the one advantage the Bills could have, and there are so very few, but it does not appear Dalvin Cook is going to play because He had a hamstring injury, did not practice on Wednesday, did not practice on Thursday, so it becomes very unlikely now that he's gonna play, and they might decide it's just not a good idea when they have the Rams and Eagles coming up. But man, that's the only area where I'm seeing is maybe get some pressure up front, but I feel like they've got ways to beat that and have done that successfully under Keenum and now under Cousins as well.
Yeah, and quickly on the Stephon Diggs point, the only reason I think Trey White might shadow him is just because we saw last week the Bills had him follow around Keenan Allen, and Keenan Allen kind of does a little bit of the same thing where he lines up in the slot, lines up outside, sometimes lines up in the backfield, and he wasn't on him every single play because sometimes the Bills went into their more normal zone coverage, but when they were in man coverage, White was right over Allen, and he kept him quiet when he was in that man coverage. It was pretty impressive to watch. Now, in terms of Dalvin Cook, that is definitely a plus for the Bills. I mean, their run defense was a bit better against the Chargers than it was against the Ravens, but they will be going in without a fourth defensive tackle, and Sean McDermott believes heavily in the rotation up front. They're going to be going into it without their best run stuffing defensive end, which is Shaq Lawson, who is going to be down for the second straight week due to a hamstring injury. So there are a few concern areas, but I think the Vikings could still have some success, even with Latavius Murray. It'll probably pain Bills fans to hear this, but over Kyle Williams, because at this point in his career, he just doesn't have the same sort of get up and go to his game anymore, which is kind of the reason why I've been pushing the fact that Harrison Phillips, the young rookie, the third round pick, who's shown really well so far, he is deserving of more play time. I mean, the Bills literally played Kyle Williams 75% of snaps. That is insane for a 34-year-old guy that just doesn't have the same get up and go anymore.
Harrison Phillips was a guy who sort of intrigued me potentially for the Vikings. They ended up going with Jalen Holmes, who's much more of a project in the fourth round for the defensive tackle position. But, a guy that had great production at Stanford, but maybe didn't have, the perfect measurables. But, that's always a tough draft conversation. But when you get into the third round, you might as well take the guy if he's got great production. But I'm curious, Joe, about just the direction you mentioned and the ownership that is there, because, it just, every time that this goes for the Buffalo Sabres, this goes for the Buffalo Bills, they own both teams. Every time it seems like, okay, they've got that direction down and they're going to stick with this coach and they're going to ride it out through the tough times. There isn't a whole lot of patience there. And I mean, if you start the season losing the way they did to the Ravens and then to the Chargers and get beat by 50 or something in Minnesota, I mean, is there any way that McDermott can be on the hot seat, or, I mean, what would it take?
No, I honestly believe they could go 0-16 this year and he's fine. He and Brandon Beane have both done everything that they have promised to Terry and Kim Pegula, the owners of the Bills, to this point in time since they have been hired. I mean, their goal last year was not making the playoffs. They all thought that they were not going to be good last year, and then they got some lucky bounces. They started off 5-2. Then the trade deadline came around. They're like, wow, we've got a really good shot to end this 17-year playoff drought. And then they went and acquired Kelvin Benjamin. And so they actually made the playoffs. So that bought them goodwill. And then from there, even with only having the 22nd overall pick, they somehow transitioned that and a bunch of trades into moving into the top 10 to get a quarterback like they promised they were going to do in 2018. And a quarterback that the entire organization believes in. And then on top of it all, they ended up moving back up the order in the first round to go land what they hope to be a franchise quarterback type of middle linebacker in Tremaine Edmonds, who's just a physical freak. So all of these things that they have told the Pegulas that were going to happen. Also, not even on the football side, cleaning up the building, because it was long overdue for all of the people from all the days of yesteryear to be jettisoned out of the building, and they got rid of all the leaks. You don't know. you might not notice a lot of stuff coming from the Bills anymore. That's because they were trying to sniff out all these leaks that were there inside the building. So they have done all of those things, which is why I think Terry and Kim Pagula are very much on the same page with Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. And even Sean McDermott over the past couple of weeks has said things like, no, it's early in the second year. And nobody said it was going to be easy. All of these turns of phrase that indicate one thing. They're cool with losing this year as long as they're learning, as long as they're progressing, as long as they're evolving, and as long as they start to get a little bit more competitive in games. I think they are just fine with a season that results with a top 5 draft pick.
Well, Joe, that I am as pro-tank as pro-tank has ever been. It's just, I wonder about the level of patience that happens there, and maybe, making the playoffs was about the worst thing that could have happened, because then it sort of made it look worse, especially on the national spectrum. And then the last thing I want to ask you about here is just the guy retiring. I mean, Vontae Davis retiring at halftime. I'm sure that you've spent your whole week talking about this and answering questions about it. But in one way, Joe, I feel like, hey, respect, man. Like, if you can't do it anymore, then just tell everybody you can't do it and walk away. But then on the other side of things, if you're trying to sell Sean McDermott, hey, we're building this culture here and everything else, to have a veteran player just be like, nope. And Anquan Boldin kind of did the same thing to them last year. It doesn't exactly inspire a whole lot of confidence of everybody around him.
Lucky's 13 Pubs has you covered for the best game day experience this football season. Tons of TVs, legendary appetizers, amazing fresh half-pound burgers, handcrafted sandwiches, and a wide variety of other pub favorites. The drink menu is awesome too. Huge selection of tap beer, handcrafted cocktails, and the best Bloody Marys in town. Seriously, these Bloodies are awesome. Try the Bacon Bloody, the Jalapeno Bloody, the Mother Mary, or just get a flight and try them all. Plus, Lucky's 13 celebrates Sunday Fun Day. Happy hour all day long on Sunday, every Sunday. Events and prize giveaways during games, too. Lucky's 13 has locations in Bloomington, Burnsville, Mendota, Plymouth, and Roseville. Having people over for the game? Call ahead to Lucky's and order some of those legendary apps, and they'll be ready to bring home when you get there. It's football time at Lucky's 13 Pubs. Find them online at luckys13pub.com. luckys13pub.com. It's the most wonderful time of the year, football time. And Lucky's 13 Pubs has you covered for the best game day experience. luckys13pub.com.
No, it doesn't look great from the outside perspective, and that's very clear. But even after Anquan Boldin retired, that entire locker room kind of rallied around each other, and they really bought all the way the heck into what Sean McDermott was saying, even to the point in which they overperformed by winning 9 games, which was far more than they probably should have. And they also got some random bounces their way, and it all helped too. But I think, by and large, they overperformed. And even though this Vontae Davis thing happened, they still have, even though they have a lot of younger guys playing, they still have a lot of older veterans in the locker room, like Kyle Williams, like Lorenzo Alexander, that a lot of these younger guys are leaning on when it comes to, what to do as a professional. So, and it was definitely an unexpected thing. And just to give you for instance, about how this whole thing kind of went down on Sunday, I saw Lafayette Pitts, who is their special teams cornerback, in the game on defense in the second half. And so my immediate response, because I'm absolutely neurotic, is to go and look to see wherever the player he just replaced is on the sidelines. Is he hurt? What's going on? Is he in the medical tent? Is he on the medical table? What happened there? I'm not seeing 22 anywhere. I must have looked in binoculars about 10 different times. Then I looked to see if he was just out there, maybe just some street clothes. Didn't see him there. I went up to the Bills PR staff and I said, hey, is there something up with Davis? And they said, nope, not injury related. And that immediately triggered something like, what's going on here? And so I tweeted out a few times. No one really took to it. And then after the fact, when Sean McDermott was asked about it, he said, yeah, he told us he was done. And then later on, the reports were that he left the stadium at halftime. And I think the biggest contention with him was not that he decided it was enough for him, because I can respect that. I mean, these guys are humans. You know, if you don't feel like you have it in your heart anymore, then don't do it. Even pull yourself out of the game. I think the biggest contention most of the players probably had with that was, okay, well then why did you have to leave the stadium?
Right.
I mean,
right.
You could have waited an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then sent out your message on NFL. And it's not even as though people would have ridiculed him. He could have he could have walked out of the building without talking to media. Someone from the media could have came up to him and said, "Hey, you got a minute?" And he could have said, "You know what? No, I'm just gonna head out."
Pull the Kyle Orton.
And yeah, that could have been fine, but he was gone and never heard from again. And I don't think the Bills have heard from him again.
Okay. Now, real last thing. How fun is it for you to see Ryan Fitzpatrick doing Ryan Fitzpatrick things, considering that was one of the first guys you covered and is one of the all-time great people in football?
I still to this day maintain that he was my favorite player to cover in the NFL, just because, I mean, people can see it now, but I mean, that guy has about 14 lives. Screw 9. He's got, he just keeps coming back. I think I saw someone, I forget who it was, but it was brilliant. They did the Ryan Fitzpatrick cycle where he signs a big contract and then
yes.
he stinks, gets released, goes to another team, backs up, the other quarterback gets hurt or suspended. He gets in the lineup, tears it up, gets a new contract. The cycle starts again. I mean, but to be honest, he's one of the nicer guys in the league. When he has that type of success, you're like, all right, well, I mean, I don't know how he's doing it at 34 years old, but he's still managing to crush it. I don't know how long he can keep it up, because we've seen this from Fitzpatrick before, but, you know, I'm sure people in Tampa Bay are certainly riding the Fitz wave, and they'll continue to ride it, because I've seen that before with my own eyes.
Joe, great to catch up with you here. I appreciate the analysis from the Bills side, and let's have an omelet on Sunday morning.
I totally agree. Can't wait.
All right. Thanks, Joe, and thank you all for listening to this episode of the Purple Podcast.
Welcome to the Total Wireless store, where total confidence awaits.
I need an out-of-this-world phone at a down-to-earth price.
Don't worry, you got this with Total Wireless. Right now, get $100 off Samsung's most popular smartphones, like the Galaxy S9, when you move to the nation's best 4G LTE network.
That's a galaxy within reach.
Houston, we have savings.
Discover the Total Wireless stores and get total confidence. The latest phones, the best network, all at great prices. Now open in New York.
New service line activation required on Simple Mobile with Total Wireless. Refer to the latest terms and conditions of service at TotalWireless.com.
Napa know-how. Keeping it simple is usually a good thing. And when it comes to rewards programs, keeping it simple is always a good thing. That's why we made the Napa Rewards program effortless. All you need is your phone number to start saving on the parts and tools you need. Then we automatically give you $5 off your next purchase for every 100 you spend. So start saving today with Napa Rewards. Quality parts, helpful people. That's Napa know-how.
Napa know-how.
I'm Rita Foley with an AP News Minute. Why didn't someone call the FBI when it happened? That's what the president wants to know about the alleged sexual attack 36 years ago that a woman says was committed by the president's now Supreme Court nominee, Brett Kavanaugh.
Brett Kavanaugh, I want to tell you that Brett Kavanaugh is one of the finest human beings you will ever have the privilege of knowing or meeting.
Kavanaugh's accuser, Christine Blasey Ford, is willing to tell her story to the Senate Judiciary Committee, says her lawyer, under certain conditions. Kavanaugh denies her accusations. At least one, maybe more, gunmen opened fire on mourners at a memorial service last night in Syracuse, New York. 5 people shot and wounded, says the police chief.
We had 5 victims, and one of which is an 8-year-old female, as we have established. And this is something that cannot occur in our community.
The police chief of Syracuse. I'm Rita Foley.